Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Sarah's Dawnfall had never been so humiliated. The icy wind of the Moonspire courtyard slapped against her face as she knelt on broken stone. Her palms scraped raw from where Torrin Blackridge had forced her down. The torches flickered in cruel rhythm, illuminating the circle of wolves surrounding her, dozens of them, watching like predators amused by a cornered deer. Torrin's voice was a slow, poisoned snarl as he tugged her chin upward with one clawed finger. "Look at you," he whispered, "the human girl who dared speak against an alpha." The crowd murmured. Saris tasted blood, copper, and shame twisted together. She wanted to stand, but Torrin's boot pressed harder between her shoulder blades. And then, cutting through the tense air, came a sound that stilled every breath. A deep, dangerous growl, one that carried authority older than the mountains. Liren Vael stepped from the shadows. The royal wolf, the one who never bowed. His silver eyes glowed with silent fury as they locked onto Saris, then rose to Torrin with a promise of violence. Torrin stiffened. Everyone knew Liren bowed to no one, which made his next step toward her all the more shocking. Liren moved like thunder trapped inside flesh. 1 second, Torrin's boot pinned Saris. The next, Liren's hand wrapped around Torrin's collar, lifting him clean off the ground. The courtyard gasped as the royal wolf slammed him against the obsidian wall hard enough to rattle the torches. "Release her," Liren growled, not a request, not a command, but a primal verdict. Torrin choked, trying to regain footing. "She insulted me," he sputtered. "She questioned my judgment." Liren tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "A strong leader is not threatened by a voice," he said coldly. "Only a coward silences one." The words cut sharper than claws. Torrin froze, but Liren wasn't done. He stepped closer, lowering his voice until only Torrin could hear. "Touch her again," he murmured, "and I will personally tear the fear from your bones." When Liren finally released him, Torrin collapsed to his knees, gasping. The wolves watching went silent, unsure which was more shocking, that Liren had intervened at all, or that his fury had been unleashed for a human girl. Saris rose slowly, trembling. She expected him to ignore her now, but instead, unbelievably, he turned toward her. His gaze met hers, and for a heartbeat Saris forgot the sting of humiliation. Liren's eyes held something she had never seen in him, an emotion almost like recognition, as if some invisible thread had tightened between them. But then it vanished, replaced by the cold restraint he was known for. "You should be more careful," he said, voice even, though his hands were still tense at his sides. "This place devours the careless." Saris opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Not gratitude, not anger, just breath. She had seen Liren Vael from afar before, every villager had. He was the alpha of alphas, a king among wolves, a creature whispered about in both awe and fear. He bowed to no one. He served no one. He saved no one. Yet he had stepped in. For her. Why? Torrin limped away, shooting her a venomous glare. The others dispersed in uneasy silence, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Saris's heartbeat thundered, confusion thick in her veins. But Liren simply turned as if already regretting his interference. "Stay out of trouble, human," he said softly. He began to walk away, but something inside Saris snapped loose. Something fierce, something bruised but unbroken. "Wait!" she blurted out. Liren paused, shoulders tensing slightly. The night air felt suddenly alive, crackling between them. Saris swallowed, hating the tremor in her voice. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "You never intervene. Not for anyone." Liren turned his head just enough that she could see the outline of his jaw against the moonlight, sharp and unreadable. Because I won't tolerate injustice, he replied. But Saris shook her head. No, she said, stepping closer. That's not it. You could have stopped Torin from hurting anyone in the tribe before, but you didn't. So why me? A flicker crossed Liren's eyes, too quick to define, too fragile to trust. You ask too many questions, he said finally, and for a moment she thought he would leave. Instead, he took one step closer, his voice dropping to a low rasp. There are answers you're not ready to hear. The wind howled between them like a warning. Before she could respond, the royal horns blared across the mountain. Deep, echoing notes that signaled danger. Wolves rushed toward the northern gate, their silhouettes moving like shadows with purpose. Liren's expression hardened instantly. All softness vanished. Stay here, he ordered. But Saris stepped forward, refusing to be treated like a helpless child. If someone's hurt, I can help. No. His rejection was immediate, sharp. This threat isn't human, and it isn't merciful. Then he hesitated, eyes sweeping over her still bloodied knuckles, and the defiance burning in her gaze. Something shifted. Go to the inner hall, he said more quietly. Arison will find you. He turned toward the gate, but halfway there, something compelled him to look back at her. Saris felt that gaze like heat against her skin. Then he shifted into his wolf form, massive, silver, regal. But as he ran toward danger, every wolf watching saw it. The royal wolf who never bowed had paused for a human girl, and Saris felt it in her bones. This was only the beginning. Saris Dawnfall had always believed humiliation taught two lessons: who you were and who the world wanted you to be. Long before Torin had forced her to her knees, long before Liren Viel had shattered the silence of the courtyard, Saris's life had already been bent under the weight of one truth. She did not belong in Moonspire. She had arrived here one icy spring night with her older brother, Arison, after fleeing a burned-out village and a father who never came home. Wolves had found them shivering near the border, half-starved, half-feral, entirely human. The Moonspire wolves tolerated them out of obligation, nothing more. Arison worked the towers as a night scout. Saris cleaned lantern rooms, storerooms, and sometimes the healer's hall. She survived by staying quiet, unnoticed. But trouble always found her anyway, because Saris had something the wolves despised in a human: opinions. And she accidentally wielded them like knives. The flashback began 2 weeks before the courtyard humiliation, on a cold dawn when frost kissed the rooftops and the world felt fragile enough to shatter beneath bare feet. That morning, Saris had woken to the smell of burning pine, a scent that always made her heart twist because it reminded her of home. She wrapped a frayed shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside her narrow room in the human quarters. Moonspire wasn't beautiful. It was imposing. Jagged towers speared the sky like black fangs, and everything was carved from iron-dark stone. Wolves moved through the streets with effortless authority, their strides smooth and silent. Saris walked differently, too cautious, too aware of her place. She kept her eyes lowered as she carried a basket of clean cloths toward the healer's hall. But halfway there, she saw something that made her pause. On the training ground, Liren Viel stood alone, practicing in human form. She had never seen him unarmored before. His movements were fluid, predatory, almost mesmerizing. He swung a silver-edged staff, each strike precise, deliberate. The morning light caught his raven-black hair, making it shimmer like storm clouds. Saris couldn't look away. For someone who never bowed, he fought like someone carrying invisible chains. She wasn't the only one watching. Ilani Cresthaven, the royal advisor, stood near the edge of the training yard. Her pale hair swayed like icy silk, and her turquoise eyes tracked every motion Liren made. Ilani had always unsettled Saris. She moved with the calm confidence of someone who knew how power tasted. Saris lingered too long, because suddenly Ilani's gaze slid sharply toward her. Saris startled and dropped one of the cloths. Ilani approached with a quiet, calculated smile. "Human girl," she said softly. "You shouldn't stare at the king." Saris stiffened. "I wasn't—" "You were," Ilani replied, still smiling. "Curiosity is charming in children, dangerous in adults." Saris lowered her eyes, heat crawling up her neck. Ilani leaned closer. "Some wolves are born from storms," she whispered. "Some are born from prophecy. Liren is both. And humans like you?" Her smile sharpened. "You are born to stay out of the way." Saris clutched her basket tighter. She wanted to snap back, but her throat locked. When Ilani walked away, Saris felt the sting not just of insult, but of warning. And she didn't understand why it mattered so much. Later that day, Saris worked alongside Sivra Moonglade in the healer's hall. Sivra was different from the others, gentle, soft-spoken, with warm brown eyes and a faint sunmark on her wrist. Wolves trusted her with their wounds. Humans trusted her with their secrets. She tied her braids back as she sorted herbs. "You look troubled," Sivra said. Saris hesitated, then sighed. "Ilani saw me watching Liren train." Sivra paused, glancing up. "Ah, that would trouble anyone." Saris frowned. She spoke like I had done something wrong. Sivra nodded slowly. "Ilani cares deeply for the king. Some say too deeply." Saris blinked. "Are they—" "No." Sivra cut her off gently. "Liren does not give his heart easily. Or at all." She smiled softly. "But he inspires devotion, even from those who shouldn't feel it." Saris didn't like how her stomach knotted at the idea. Sivra reached for a jar of dried roots. "Be cautious, Saris. Wolves sense attachment like blood in the snow." Saris tried to laugh, but the warning slid under her skin like a needle. That evening, Arisen returned from patrol and found her sitting by the fire, staring at the flames. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. But she didn't tell him why her thoughts kept turning back to a silver-eyed wolf king who never bowed to anyone. If she had known what would happen the next morning, she might have stayed hidden in her room forever. Torrin Blackridge arrived at the healer's hall with a wounded soldier, fury already simmering beneath his skin. He snapped at Saris for being slow, then for asking questions, then simply for breathing in his direction. She bit her tongue until the taste of blood filled her mouth. But when he grabbed Sivra by the wrist for a mistake that wasn't hers, Saris stepped between them without thinking. "Let her go," she said, voice trembling but firm. Torrin froze, shocked that a human dared contradict him. The hall went silent. Sivra tried to pull Saris back, but Torrin shoved her aside and seized Saris by the forearm. "You forget your place," he snarled. "No," Saris whispered. "You forget yours." That was the moment Torrin dragged her to the courtyard. That was the moment the humiliation began. But before he could finish breaking her spirit, Liren Vael stepped out of the shadows, and the royal wolf who never bowed did something unthinkable. He defended a human, her. And though Saris didn't understand it yet, that single moment had changed the entire mountain. Because wolves didn't fight for humans. Kings didn't risk loyalty for strangers. And Liren Vael had just made his first irreversible mistake. Or his first undeniable choice. The royal horns were still echoing across the mountains when Liren Vael reached the northern gate, his wolf paws pounding against frost-coated stone. But even as he sprinted toward danger, the image of Saris on her knees, her hands trembling, her pride crushed beneath Torrin's boot, kept replaying in his mind like a wound refusing to close. He snarled under his breath, furious at himself for caring, furious that the sight had shaken something loose inside him. Wolves scattered as he approached, forming a tense semicircle around a shattered carriage half buried in snow. Smoke curled upward in thin, ghostly ribbons. The horses were gone. The guards who should have been inside were missing. And carved into the side of the carriage was a symbol Liren hadn't seen in years. A crescent carved through a skeletal eye. The mark of the fallen creed. His blood went cold. They were hunters of wolves, killers of royalty, enemies who moved in silence and shadows. Alani hurried up beside him, her cloak snapping in the wind. "It's them," she whispered. Liren growled. For years the creed had been dormant. Now they had returned. On the same day he had revealed weakness in front of his entire court. His transformation rippled as he shifted back into human form, snow steaming off his skin. He approached the wreckage, kneeling beside a blood smear frozen into the ground. "This is fresh," he murmured. Maelor Thorn, his second in command, stepped forward, jaw clenched. "Tracks lead northeast," he said. "They took survivors." Liren closed his eyes briefly. Survivors meant leverage. Leverage meant betrayal. And betrayal meant someone inside Moonspire had opened a door they shouldn't have. "Search teams?" Liren asked. "Already out," Maelor replied. Liren rose, rolling his shoulders like a creature ready to tear the mountain open. But Ilani touched his arm gently, her voice soft. "You shouldn't go alone, my king." He pulled away. "I'm not your king in this," he said. "I'm a wolf who owes blood." And yet, beneath the fury, something else pulsed. An echo of Ceres's voice, trembling but brave. "Why did you do that? You never intervene?" It haunted him, irritated him, tempted him. He didn't know when a human girl had become a thread tangled in his thoughts. He only knew the moment Torin had touched her. Something instinctive and ancient had risen in him like fire. Back in the inner hall, Ceres paced the stone floor, her heartbeat thumping unevenly. The torches cast long shadows that stretched like claws across the walls. Arison hadn't arrived yet, and the hall felt too quiet, too suffocating. She replayed Liren's words again and again. "This threat isn't human, and it isn't merciful." What did that even mean? She pressed her hands together, fingers still shaking from the courtyard. She wasn't used to being protected. She wasn't used to anyone standing up for her. The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. Wolves didn't defend humans. Wolves didn't risk standing against their own kind. Wolves didn't look at humans the way Liren had looked at her. Jorah Windmer suddenly burst into the hall, breathless. "Ceres!" she gasped. "Are you hurt?" "I heard Torin dragged you outside in front of everyone." Ceres forced a weak smile. "I'm fine." Jorah's eyes widened. "Did Torin actually—" "Yes," Ceres whispered. Jorah clenched her fists. "I swear, if Liren hadn't stepped in—" She stopped abruptly, realizing what she had said. Ceres felt her cheeks warm. "Forget about that," she muttered. "There are more important things happening." As if summoned by her words, the doors slammed open, and Maelor strode in with 2 guards. His presence filled the hall with heavy tension. "All humans must remain inside," he announced. "The mountain is under temporary lockdown." Ceres stepped forward. "Why?" Maelor's gaze flicked to her, a flicker of irritation, then something like curiosity. "Because danger moves beyond the gates," he said. "And we won't waste warriors protecting the vulnerable." The words stung, even if they weren't meant as cruelty. Arison finally entered behind the guards and immediately wrapped his arms around Ceres. "Are you all right?" She nodded against his shoulder, but Maelor was still watching her. "Liren wants you to stay put," he said. Ceres froze. "Liren wants—" Jorah's brows shot up. Arison turned slowly toward Ceres, confusion sharp on his face. "Why would the king know where you are?" Ceres opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't know how to explain something she barely understood. Maelor gave one last assessing look before leaving. Once the hall fell quiet, Jorah whispered. Cerys? Did something happen between you and Lyran? Cerys's heart stuttered. No, she said too quickly, but inside a terrifying question took root. Why does the royal wolf care whether I'm safe? Far beyond the gates, Lyran tracked the scent trail through the snow-drenched forest, his breath clouding in silver plumes. Each step grew colder, sharper. The fallen creed always left traps, but this one felt different. Intentional, personal. And he hated the thought that his court had witnessed him choosing a human over a wolf. He hated even more that it had been instinct, not strategy. You hesitated tonight, Mailer said quietly, running beside him. Not like you. Lyran didn't respond. He couldn't. Mailer continued, his tone gentle but firm. A king must never show preference. Not to anyone. Especially not to a human. Lyran slowed, his jaw tightening. I showed justice, he said. Mailer shook his head. The court won't see it that way. Lyran growled softly, snow swirling around his feet. Let them talk. They will, Mailer said. They already are. Lyran inhaled sharply, the scent trail mixing with cold pine and distant blood. Cerys's face flashed in his mind again, eyes wide, lips trembling, spine refusing to break. Something inside him clenched. He didn't know what she was to him. He didn't want to know. But he felt it in his bones. Whatever had begun between them, whatever force had pulled him toward her, was not done weaving its consequences. Moonspire always fell into an eerie silence at night, too quiet for a kingdom ruled by wolves. Cerys Dawnfall lay awake in the dim human quarters, staring at the ceiling as shadows crawled across the stone like restless spirits. Sleep refused to claim her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lyran grabbing Torrin by the throat, silver eyes burning with something she couldn't name. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if she could steady the storm there. She didn't understand why his voice still echoed in her mind, or why remembering the way he had looked at her made her breath catch. She was nobody. He was a king, and yet something had shifted in the moment he stood between her and danger. A thread she couldn't untie. Arison slept in the adjoining room, exhausted from patrol. Cerys envied his peace. She rose quietly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. The torches flickered low, casting a soft amber glow. She needed air, space, anything to stop the feeling that something inside her was changing. Something she had no control over. She didn't know that outside the mountain walls, Lyran Viel was thinking the same thing about her. Lyran waited at the edge of the forest, his breath cold mist in the moonlight. The bodies of 2 Moonspire scouts lay half-buried in snow, their throats marked by the twisted blade signature of the fallen creed. Rage pulsed under his skin, threatening to burst into full wolf form, but he forced it down. He crouched beside the nearest fallen warrior, fingers brushing the snow-covered hair. I'm sorry, he whispered. Mailer stood behind him, arms crossed, scanning the darkness. They're sending a message, he said. Lyran rose slowly, eyes narrowing. They always do. But this one felt different, closer, more intimate. As if the enemy had stepped inside his thoughts and chosen their targets accordingly. He started walking again, boots crunching through the icy crust. Their scent trail veered east, toward the hollow ridge where the forest grew twisted and the moonlight died before reaching the ground. Mailer hesitated. We should wait for reinforcements. Lyran didn't stop. Every minute we wait, another life is lost. Mailer sighed. You're thinking with your emotions. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then Lyran answered quietly. Maybe for the first time in my life. He didn't say the name haunting that confession. But he felt it, like pressure against his ribs. Cerys. Back inside Moonspire, Cerys pressed her palms against the cold metal railing overlooking the lower courtyard. The world felt still, breathless. Wolves patrolled the grounds with rigid shoulders, as if anticipating a threat they couldn't see. She watched them move with unsettling coordination. Torches carved warm circles of light, but everything beyond them was swallowed by night. Jorah appeared beside her, hugging herself against the chill. "I knew you couldn't sleep," she murmured. Saris managed a faint smile. "Too much on my mind." Jorah nudged her lightly. "Anything to do with a certain king who risked his entire reputation for you today?" Saris's cheeks warmed. "I didn't ask him to." "Of course not," Jorah said, smirking. "But he did anyway." Saris looked down at her scraped hands, suddenly small beneath the weight of attention she didn't want. "It doesn't mean anything," she insisted. "He would have helped anyone." Jorah raised an eyebrow. "No, he wouldn't have." Saris's breath hitched. She didn't want to admit how deeply that truth unsettled her. Jorah touched her shoulder gently. "Be careful, Saris. Wolves bond through instinct, not logic. And the king, he's dangerous when he wants something." Saris didn't respond. She didn't know how to explain that the danger wasn't Lirin. It was what she felt when he looked at her. The moon had climbed its highest when Lirin and Maelor reached Hollow Ridge. The forest here was silent in an unnatural way, as if the air had sunk into the earth and refused to rise. Trees twisted upward like gnarled fingers, branches clawing at the sky. Lirin lifted a hand, motioning for Maelor to stop. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. He crouched, sniffing the air. The Creed's scent was fading, but beneath it lay another, sharper, fresh. He stepped forward slowly, eyes narrowing at the shape half hidden behind a fallen log. A cloak. Not the Creed's. Not wolf-made. Human. His pulse kicked hard. Maelor noticed the shift. "What is it?" Lirin didn't answer. He lifted the cloak, frost crackling off its edges. It smelled faintly of pine resin, and warm hearth smoke, moonspire smoke. His stomach tightened. "Someone from the mountain was here," he said. "Recently." Maelor's expression darkened. "A traitor?" Lirin clenched the cloak so tightly the fabric threatened to tear. "Or a pawn?" They followed the faint trail deeper, but soon it vanished entirely, as if erased. Maelor exhaled in frustration. "They're playing with us!" Lirin stared at the ground, jaw tense. No, this was deliberate. He looked toward the distant lights of Moonspire, cold dread crawling up his spine. Someone inside his kingdom had just painted a target on their own people. Just before dawn, Saris finally returned to her room, exhausted, but closer to sleep. She pulled her shawl closer, sinking onto the mattress. The night had felt too heavy, too charged, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She rubbed her temples, trying to calm the restless feeling under her skin. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Lirin again, silver eyes glowing in the dark, the way he had stepped between her and Tauren, with a protectiveness that felt ancient. She pressed a hand to her racing heart. "This is dangerous," she whispered to herself. She didn't mean him. She meant the feeling. Outside, a low howl rose from the forest, deep, trembling, filled with grief. Saris shivered. Wolves only howled like that for 2 reasons: death or betrayal. Before she could move, the door to her room swung open, and Erison rushed inside, breathless. "Saris," he said urgently. "Lirin is back, and someone from the mountain is missing." Saris shot to her feet, heart pounding. "Who?" Erison hesitated, fear tightening his features. They think it might be someone connected to you." Saris froze, and somewhere deep inside the mountain, Lirin Vael felt the same cold dread. Because the night's first casualty was not the one he had expected. It was only the beginning. Morning had not fully risen when Saris Dawnfall followed Erison to the great hall, her breath shaky in the dim torchlight. Panic thickened the air, a sharp tension that clung to every stone and shadow. Wolves spoke in quick, clipped tones. Doors slammed, armor clattered. The mountain felt alive and afraid. Arison stopped near the war table, gripping her shoulders. "Saris, I need you to stay calm." Her heart pounded. "Who is missing?" Arison hesitated, jaw tight. "Jorah Windmar." The world seemed to tilt. Jorah, her friend, her confidant, the one who had stood beside her while the wolves whispered behind her back. Saris blinked hard, heat stinging her eyes. "No, she was with me last night. She went home. Her door was open," Arison said softly. "No signs of struggle. Just gone." Saris shook her head, refusing to accept the sudden hollow ache forming inside her chest. Jorah would never leave without telling her. Something terrible had happened. Something connected to the cloak Liren found in the forest. Saris swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. "Where is the king?" Arison exhaled, preparing to question everyone who had contact with Jorah yesterday. Saris froze, dread coiling in her stomach. She had been the last. Liren Vael stood near the head of the war table, his presence radiating silent authority. Yet beneath that regal stillness, Saris sensed something else, anger simmering just below the surface. He turned when she entered, his silver eyes sweeping over her in a single, assessing motion. He wasn't looking for injuries. He was looking for answers. "Saris," he said, voice low, "come forward." Wolves shifted aside as she approached, their gazes sharp and suspicious. She felt exposed under their scrutiny, but Liren's eyes anchored her. "Jorah is missing," he said. "You were the last person seen with her." The words didn't hold accusation, not exactly, but Saris felt the weight of them like chains. "We were together in the courtyard," she said softly, "talking. She was worried about the attack, worried about me." Liren's jaw tightened. Did she say anything unusual? Anything that might explain why she left her room? Saris shook her head. "Nothing. She was scared, but—" She paused, the memory hitting her. She said wolves bond through instinct, that kings are dangerous when they want something. A brief flicker crossed Liren's eyes. Guilt? Recognition? But it vanished quickly. "And?" She hesitated. "She warned me to be careful." Mailer stepped forward. "Careful of what?" Saris lifted her chin, feeling suddenly, terrifyingly honest. "Of the king." Silence cracked through the hall like lightning. Wolves stiffened. Liren's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Something sharp. Mailer's voice was edged with irritation. "You dare imply the king threatened your friend?" "No," Saris said quickly. "I'm saying Jorah worried about the attention he's shown me." The admission made warmth creep up her neck. She thought it might make others angry. Liren's gaze softened, but only slightly. "She was right," he murmured. The hall erupted in whispers. Ilani stepped forward, her voice like velvet over steel. "Human girl, suggesting your friend vanished because of your interactions with the king is a dangerous assumption." Saris met her eyes. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what she said." Liren raised a hand, silencing the room. "Enough." His voice carried a quiet finality. He stepped closer to Saris, lowering his tone so only she could hear. "You should not have said that in front of them." "Why?" she whispered. "Because it's true?" His breath caught, just barely. "Because they will twist your words," he murmured. "And because what I feel is my burden, not yours." Saris's pulse stumbled. What I feel. It wasn't a confession, but it was closer than any king had the right to be. Before she could speak, a scout burst into the hall, armor clattering. "My king," he gasped. "We found tracks, small footprints, leading out of the south gate." Saris's heart lurched. Jorah? Liren turned sharply. Human? Yes, my king, the scout said. Too small to be a wolf, and she was alone. The hall erupted with tension. Cerys moved forward instinctively. Then she's alive, she breathed. We can find her. Maelor blocked her path. You're not coming. Liren shot him a warning look, but Maelor didn't back down. With respect, my king, bringing her will slow us down. Liren studied Cerys, conflict etched across his features. She may know her friend's habits, he said quietly. Patterns. Secrets. Maelor sighed. Or she may be bait. The room fell silent. Cerys' stomach twisted. I'm not bait. Liren stepped toward her, eyes softening. No, he said quietly. You're not. Something inside Cerys trembled at the certainty in his voice. Ilani watched them with a look that sent chills through Cerys' spine, something between suspicion and jealousy. Liren finally spoke. Cerys comes with us. The wolves murmured, uneasy, but none dared challenge him. Cerys swallowed hard. She had never feared the forest before. But now, walking beside the Wolf King who had defended her, she felt both safer and far more exposed than ever before. Frost clung to the branches as Liren led the search party through the southern woods. The air tasted of iron and danger. Cerys walked close behind him, her shawl clutched tight, her breath visible in trembling clouds. Every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of snow, the whisper of wind, the distant crack of a twig. Liren slowed suddenly, lifting a hand. The group halted. He crouched beside a narrow trail where the snow had been disturbed by hurried steps. Cerys knelt beside him without thinking. That's her footprint, she whispered. She walks with her toes turned in slightly. She always has. Liren nodded. She was running. Maelor scanned the trees. From what? Liren stood, his body going tense. Not from something. His gaze swept east. Toward something. Cerys felt a cold dread creep into her bones. Why would she leave the safety of the mountain? Liren looked at her, silver eyes darkening. Because someone called her out. Cerys shook her head. Jorah wouldn't answer a stranger. No, he agreed. She wouldn't. His gaze locked with Cerys's, sharp and grave. She'd only go if she thought someone close to her was in danger. Cerys felt the world tilt. She thought it was me. Liren's silence was confirmation enough. Cerys's throat tightened. Jorah hadn't vanished. She'd been lured. Because of Cerys. And as snow fell like ash around them, Liren spoke the words she feared most. This wasn't a kidnapping, he said softly. It was a message. Cerys felt the message in her bones, cold, cruel, unmistakable. Someone wanted her to suffer. Someone wanted Liren to break. And the first crack had already formed. Snow thickened around them as the search party pressed deeper into the southern woods, the world narrowing into cold breath and crunching footsteps. Cerys Dawnfall stayed close behind Liren, her fingers gripping her shawl so tightly the fabric dug into her skin. Every rustle, every shifting branch made her flinch. The forest felt wrong, watchful, as if something moved beneath the silence. Liren paused suddenly, nostrils flaring. Do you smell that? He murmured. Cerys inhaled shakily, but all she caught was frost and pine. Maelor stepped beside him. Smoke, he said. Faint. East Ridge. Liren nodded, jaw tight. That's where they wanted us to go. Cerys swallowed. You think this is a trap? Liren looked at her, his expression unreadable. Yes. The word hung in the air, cold and heavy. Then why walk into it? She whispered. His gaze softened, just slightly. Because your friend is somewhere beyond that ridge. Cerys' stomach twisted with guilt so sharp it almost hurt. Jorah had walked into danger because she believed Cerys was in trouble, And now Cerys was leading wolves into something far worse. Liren stepped closer, his voice low. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." Cerys nodded, but fear coiled tighter around her ribs. She didn't know who the fallen creed were, but she knew what hate felt like. And the hatred directed at her was growing colder, smarter, closer. The closer they drew to the ridge, the stronger the smell of smoke became. Bitter, acrid, clinging to the back of Cerys's throat. Liren lifted a hand, signaling silence. Wolves formed a protective arc around them. The forest opened into a narrow clearing, where smoke curled from a small fire pit, still glowing. A discarded chain lay beside it, half buried in snow. Cerys gasped. "Jorah!" She rushed forward, but Liren caught her wrist, pulling her back. "Look," he whispered. She blinked past her panic, and then saw it. The chain wasn't broken. It had been cut cleanly, deliberately. Mailer crouched beside it, frowning. "No signs of struggle," he said. "Whoever held her didn't restrain her for long." Liren's brows furrowed, because they wanted her to escape. Cerys stared at him. "But why?" Liren turned slowly toward the trees, eyes narrowing. "Because they wanted us to follow her trail." A chill crawled up Cerys's spine. Mailer stood, his voice tense. "So we're walking straight into their hands." Liren's jaw twitched. "Not if we turn the trap on them." But before he could explain, a soft crunch echoed through the trees. Cerys spun around. A figure emerged from the shadows. Small, shaking, wrapped in a torn cloak. "Jorah!" Cerys cried. She ran forward, but the girl stumbled, collapsing into the snow. Cerys caught her, heart thundering. "You're okay! You're okay!" But Jorah's eyes were wide, terrified. "Cerys," she whispered hoarsely, "you shouldn't have come." Liren knelt beside them, his presence a wall of heat against the frozen air. "What happened?" he asked. Jorah swallowed, her teeth chattering. "I heard someone calling my name. In your voice, Cerys." Cerys's breath froze. "My voice?" Jorah nodded weakly. "They sounded scared. I thought it was you." Liren's eyes darkened. The creed mimics voices. It's one of their oldest tricks. Jorah looked at him, panic rising. I didn't know. Cerys hugged her tightly. "It's not your fault." Jorah's next words trembled. "They said they didn't want me. They wanted you." Cerys stiffened. Liren's fists clenched. "What else?" he asked. Jorah hesitated, glancing at Cerys with guilt twisting her expression. "They said the king would come for you, and that when he did, they would have everything they needed." The clearing dropped into silence. Liren stood slowly, tension building in his shoulders like a storm. Mailer stepped closer. "My king, this was never a trap for the girl." Liren nodded, voice low, furious. "No." He looked at Cerys. "It was a trap for me." Cerys felt something inside her crack. She had known she was a burden. She hadn't known she was bait. And the worst part? The way Liren looked at her, not with anger, but with fear. Fear for her. Fear because of her. Before anyone could speak again, the forest exploded with movement. Dark figures dropped from the trees, masks carved with bone patterns, blades gleaming silver. The fallen creed. They moved with inhuman silence. Cerys screamed as Liren shoved her behind him just as the first attacker lunged. Steel clashed against claws, sparks flying across the snow. Wolves roared, transforming mid-strike, their bodies breaking into fur and fury. Mailer leaped at a masked figure, jaws closing around the attacker's arm. Jorah crawled backward, trembling violently. Cerys tried to pull her away from the fighting, but a Creed warrior grabbed her by the wrist, dragging her across the snow. She kicked, screamed, but his grip tightened. Liren spun, eyes blazing with silver fire. "Cerys!" His voice cracked through the chaos. He launched forward, slicing through enemies with terrifying precision. But another warrior stepped between them, swinging a blade coated in something black and viscous. Poison. Liren dodged, but the distraction gave the first attacker enough time to yank Cerys closer. "Let her go!" she shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the clash of battle. Liren's form blurred as he shifted fully, massive and silver, fur bristling with fury. With a single bound, he crossed the clearing, too late. The Creed warrior slammed something against Cerys's neck. A cold shock rushed through her body. Her vision blurred. Liren's howl tore through the sky, raw and broken. And the last thing Cerys saw before darkness swallowed her was his wolf form barreling toward her with a rage that could shatter mountains. Darkness swallowed Cerys like a tide. It felt thick, cold, endless. Yet somewhere inside it she heard voices. Not clear ones. Not human ones. Whispers that brushed against her skin like claws, tugging at her mind. Unworthy. Unwanted. Chosen only to break him. She tried to pull away, but the darkness clung to her, pressing into her bones. Then, light. A violent crack of brightness split the void, and she gasped awake. Her wrists were bound with cold iron cuffs etched with strange symbols. The air stung with the scent of blood and burnt herbs. She lay on a stone floor inside a cavern, lit by torches that flickered with sickly green flames. A man stood near the opposite wall, wearing the bone mask of the fallen Creed. His voice was smooth, venomous. "Good," he murmured. "She wakes." Cerys pushed herself upright, breath trembling. "Where am I?" The man tilted his head. "Inside a place your king fears. A place built for wolves who forget their place." Cerys swallowed hard. "Why take me?" At that, the masked man paused, then slowly removed his mask, revealing sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, and a smile that chilled her. "Because, little human, the king broke his vow the moment he looked at you." From the moment Cerys vanished, Liren Viel had become something the wolves of Moonspire had never seen before. He tore through the forest with Maelor and the remaining warriors, following in stunned silence. Snow exploded beneath his paws as he raced after her scent, faint, poisoned, fading. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Every breath tasted like failure. Memories of her flashed in sharp fragments, her trembling voice in the courtyard, her stubborn chin lifted in defiance, the quiet fear beneath her courage. Why did you help me? Because he couldn't stop himself. Because something ancient inside him had chosen her long before he'd admitted it. When he reached the edge of a cliff overlooking the lower valley, he shifted back into human form with a snarl. "I smelled iron," he growled. Maelor nodded grimly. "Creed traps are laced with sleep-binding poison. She won't wake easily." Liren's hands shook. If they hurt her... Maelor stepped forward cautiously. "Liren, you are not thinking clearly." "Because I care," Liren snapped. "Because I let myself care." Wolves behind them exchanged looks of shock. Their king, confessing weakness? Maelor lowered his voice. "If they know you care, they will use her to destroy you." Liren lifted his head, eyes burning. "Then let them try." In the cavern, the unmasked Creed leader stepped closer to Cerys, studying her like a puzzle piece he wasn't sure how to place. "Do you know," he said softly, "why your king is feared even among his own kind?" Cerys tried to pull away from him. "Because he's powerful." The man chuckled. "Because he is cursed, born under a blood eclipse, marked as the wolf who will either unite or destroy the tribes." Cerys froze. She had never heard that. The man continued, circling her slowly. "He has lived his entire life untouchable, unbending, unbroken. No love, no bonds, no weaknesses." He crouched so their eyes met. Until you. Saris swallowed, throat tight. You're wrong. Am I? His smile sharpened. He slaughtered 5 of my men just to reach you. He tore through the forest like a creature possessed. You should have heard him roar your name. Saris's heartbeat stuttered painfully. She didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to attach meaning to something that might only doom her. The man leaned closer. You don't understand, human. The moment the king broke for you, he doomed himself. He stood, gesturing toward the far end of the cavern, where iron chains gleamed. And now we will finish that doom. Saris clenched her fists, refusing to let him see fear. You want to kill him. Kill? The man echoed. No, we want him to kneel. Liren and Mailer reached the valley floor where the scent trail twisted sharply toward an opening between 2 jagged rocks. A hidden cavern. Liren's blood roared. She's inside. Mailer grabbed his arm. You can't rush in. That's what they want. Liren shook him off. I don't care what they want. Then care what she needs, Mailer snapped. The words struck him like a physical blow. Liren froze, chest heaving. Mailer softened slightly. You said it yourself. You care for her. Then don't let anger guide you. Liren closed his eyes, forcing his breath steady. For Saris. Only for her. He looked at the wolves behind him. We go carefully, quietly, and if anything happens to her... His voice dropped to a low, lethal growl. There will be no creed left to bury. They nodded grimly. Liren turned toward the cavern, feeling the ancient stone vibrate beneath his feet. He could sense her, faint fear, faint breath, like a thread pulling him forward. His heart hammered painfully. Hold on, he thought. Just hold on. And as he stepped into the darkness, a realization struck him with brutal clarity. He was not entering as a king protecting a subject. He was entering as a man trying to save the one thing the world had finally given him. Too late for him to ever stop wanting. Saris watched the masked man walk to a stone altar at the center of the cavern. He lit a torch dipped in black oil, and the flames twisted into unnatural shapes. Tonight, he said, voice echoing, we break the royal wolf's destiny. She glared at him. Liren won't bow to you. The man smiled cruelly. He will. He pointed to the iron cuffs binding her. Because those chains aren't meant for you. They're meant for him. Heat rushed to Saris's face. You're using me. We are using his heart, the man corrected. And you are the only door into it. Saris felt her breath hitch. She had never been anything more than a burden. A shadow. A girl fighting to be seen. And now she was the key to the fall of a king. A distant roar suddenly echoed through the cavern. Raw, furious, unmistakable. Liren. Saris's heart leapt, hope and terror crashing together. The Creed leader smiled. He's here. He lifted his blade. Bring her to the altar. Saris kicked, struggled, but the warriors dragged her forward. She felt cold iron beneath her back, her wrists locked above her head. Panic surged, real, suffocating. Then footsteps, heavy, slow. The Creed warriors stiffened. Liren emerged from the shadows like a storm-given form, silver eyes burning with murderous intent. Let her go, he growled. The leader stepped forward, grinning beneath his mask. Kneel for her, he said softly. And she lives. Silence fell like an executioner's blade. Saris's breath shook. Liren stood still, every muscle trembling. The king who never bowed. The wolf who never broke. Slowly, painfully. He lowered one knee. Saris's heart shattered. The royal wolf had bowed, because of her. Liren Vael's knee struck the stone floor with a sound that echoed through the cavern like a death knell. The air shifted, stunned, disbelieving, almost reverent. Wolves did not kneel. Kings never bowed. Yet here he was, shoulders trembling, breath sharp, silver eyes locked on Ceres as if she were the only thing anchoring him to reason. Ceres felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear, but from the indescribable agony of watching a king break himself open for her. The Creed leader stepped forward slowly, savoring the moment. "Look at him," he whispered. "The wolf born of prophecy, undone by a human girl." Liren lifted his head, voice low and shaking with fury. "Release her." The leader smirked. "Not yet." He circled Liren like a vulture. "You denied every bond offered to you. You rejected alliances, refused mates, slaughtered anyone who tried to claim you." His voice darkened. "But she..." He leaned closer. "She made you fall without even trying." Liren's claws extended, scraping stone. Ceres tugged desperately at her chains. "Liren, don't do this for me." He met her eyes, and she felt the truth cut through her. He wasn't bowing out of defeat. He was bowing out of love he couldn't name. The Creed leader lifted his blade, pressing its tip beneath Liren's chin. "A king on his knees," he said softly. "The tribes will hear of this. They will know you aren't untouchable." He pressed harder. Blood beaded down Liren's neck. Ceres thrashed against her restraints. "Stop! Please!" The leader didn't look at her. "You, girl, are the thread that unraveled a kingdom. Do you grasp your importance?" She shook her head, breath sharp and uneven. "I never wanted any of this." He smiled. "But destiny rarely asks permission." He turned back to Liren. "Now, king, for her life, swear loyalty to the fallen Creed." The cavern went still. Liren's jaw clenched, muscles locking. Ceres felt terror grip her, because she could see him considering it. "No," she whispered. "Liren, don't." His breath trembled. "I will do anything," he growled, "except betray my people." "Then you choose her death," the leader said calmly. He raised his blade. Ceres's scream tore from her throat. But before the strike fell, Liren lunged, not for the blade, not for the leader, but toward the iron ring that held her chained to the wall. With a roar fueled by desperation, he snapped the embedded chain from the stone. The cavern erupted into chaos. Creed warriors rushed forward, but Liren moved like a living storm, shielding Ceres with his body as he shattered the restraints binding her wrists. She collapsed into his arms, the world spinning. "I've got you," he whispered, voice breaking. "I won't lose you." The Creed leader snarled, signaling his men. "Take her! Kill him!" Liren shifted half-form, fur rippling across his arms, claws lengthening, eyes glowing with feral fire. He lifted Ceres behind a fallen pillar. "Stay down! Whatever you hear, don't move." Ceres grabbed his arm. "Liren." He touched her cheek with a gentleness at odds with the monster he was becoming. "I bowed once," he said, voice trembling. "I will not bow again." Then he turned and launched into battle. Wolves charged from the shadows, Mailer at the front, howling a furious battle cry. The cavern shook with the clash of claws and metal. Ceres watched through a haze of fear as Liren tore through attackers with brutal precision. But the Creed was prepared. A masked warrior swung a chain of glowing iron around Liren's throat, pulling tight. Liren roared, thrashing. Ceres lurched forward, but Mailer held her back. "You'll die! Stay down!" She shoved against him, desperation rising like fire. "He can't breathe!" Mailer's grip tightened. "He's the king. He won't fall." But Ceres saw the truth. He would fall. For her. A sudden thought struck her like lightning. The Creed wanted Liren to break. They wanted him to watch, helplessly. Which meant she was the key to ending this. She grabbed a shard of stone from the ground and sprinted toward the leader before Mailer could catch her. "Ceres, no!" Liren choked out. The leader spun, startled as she slashed the shard across his arm. He recoiled, mask cracking. "You foolish girl!" he snarled. You think you matter? She stood trembling, but defiant. I matter to him. Those words hit the cavern like thunder. Liren surged with renewed fury, ripping the iron chain from his throat. He slammed the Creed warrior into the wall, sending him crumpling to the floor. Mailer tore through the remaining fighters, finishing those still standing. The leader backed away, clutching his bleeding arm. This changes nothing, he spat. The tribes will see their king kneel. Liren stepped in front of Saris, shielding her. The tribes will see their king fight, he growled. And they will see who I protect. The leader hissed. You've already lost. She has made you weak. Liren shook his head, voice low and deadly. No. She has made me dangerous. With a single strike, he knocked the leader unconscious. The cavern fell silent, except for the sound of Saris's uneven breathing. Liren turned to her, chest heaving, blood streaking his arms. She lifted trembling hands to touch the marks, on his neck where the chain had bitten into him. You bowed, she whispered, voice cracking. For me. Liren cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. I bowed, he murmured, because the thought of losing you terrified me more than any enemy. Saris's breath hitched. Why? His eyes softened, silver dimming into something raw and unguarded. Because somewhere between saving your life and almost losing it, you became the one thing I cannot live without. The world seemed to stop. Saris felt her heart break open, something warm and overwhelming blooming inside her. She leaned into his hand, whispering, I didn't want to matter to you. He gave a shaky, aching smile. Too late. He pulled her briefly, fiercely into his arms. You're alive, he whispered into her hair. That's all that matters. But as the wolves secured the cavern, Mailer approached, tension still tightening his jaw. This was not the end, he said quietly. Liren nodded grimly. No, the Creed won't stop. He looked down at Saris, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek with trembling fingers. They will come for you again. Saris swallowed. Then let them. Liren's eyes burned, not with fear, but with fierce, unwavering resolve. Let them try, he whispered, because now they hunt a king who has something worth killing for. And for the first time, Liren didn't fear the bond between them. He embraced it. The march back to Moonspire should have been a victory, but instead it felt like walking into the eye of a storm. Saris Dawnfall moved beside Liren, her steps unsteady, her wrists still burning from the iron cuffs. Wolves surrounded them in tight formation, scanning every shadow. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. When the mountain gates came into view, Liren paused, his hand brushing Saris's shoulder. Stay close, he murmured, voice strained. She nodded, but fear coiled inside her like a living thing. As they entered the courtyard, whispers ignited instantly, wolves staring, murmuring, stepping back as if the air around Saris carried fire. Eyes darted between her and the marks around Liren's throat, the proof of what he'd done for her. Ilani stood at the center of the courtyard, her face pale with fury. My king, she said sharply, is this true? Did you kneel for a human? Liren didn't flinch. I did what was necessary. Necessary? She hissed. You've doomed your rule. Wolves began to shout, fear, anger, disbelief mixing like sparks in dry grass. Saris felt herself shrink under the storm of eyes. Liren stepped in front of her, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Enough. I will explain inside. But before he could move, a horn blared from the watchtower. A warning. No, an invasion. Torches ignited along the outer wall as wolves scrambled into defensive formations. Liren grabbed Saris's wrist, pulling her behind him. Mailer, report! Mailer sprinted up the stone steps, scanning the horizon, his face drained of color. The fallen Creed, hundreds. They're coming toward the gates. A cold shock pierced Saris. Hundreds? Ilani turned to Liren, voice trembling. They're here for her, aren't they? Saris stiffened as dozens of eyes snapped toward her. Liren snarled. They're here for me. Because of her, Ilani spat. She is his weakness. The words struck like physical blows. Saris felt her throat tighten, heat stinging her eyes. Liren's voice dropped into a dangerous growl. She is not my weakness. He turned to Saris, eyes softening for a fraction of a second. Come. But as they moved toward the inner hall, wolves blocked their path. Torrin Blackridge stepped forward, jaw clenched. You risk all our lives for that human, he snarled. You kneel for her. You break for her. Why should we follow a king who bows? The courtyard erupted in agreement. Wolves nodded, murmured, some glaring openly at Saris as if she were the poison in their water. Saris's legs trembled. Liren's body shifted half-form, his voice rising like thunder. Because I am your king. His aura slammed into the courtyard like a physical force, and wolves stumbled back. But then the outer gate shuddered. Once, twice, cracking under heavy impact. The Creed was here. And they were breaking through. Rage surged through Liren as the gates splintered. Creed warriors poured inside, masks gleaming under torchlight. The clash of steel and claws filled the courtyard. Wolves shifted into massive forms, meeting the attackers in a violent wave. Saris felt herself shoved backward as warriors rushed past. Liren blocked two blades in a single motion, his wolf form ripping through armor like paper. Mailer fought beside him, snarling commands. Ilani hurled a bolt of lunar energy at masked figures climbing the wall, but for every Creed warrior cut down, more flooded through. Saris ducked behind a pillar, heart pounding. One Creed fighter spotted her, sprinting across the stones. She stumbled backward, tripping. He raised his blade, only to be tackled mid-air by Liren, who slammed him into the ground with devastating force. Liren turned to her, chest heaving. Saris, go to the inner keep, now. She shook her head, voice cracking. I'm not leaving you. You must. His hand cupped her cheek, brief, desperate. If they take you again, I will burn the world trying to get you back. Before she could answer, a loud crack echoed overhead. The watchtower exploded into fragments as a giant Creed battering ram smashed into its base. Wolves screamed. Dust filled the air. Saris ducked as debris rained down. And then she saw it. The Creed leader, mask repaired, stepping through the smoke with an army behind him. His voice echoed across the courtyard. Liren Vale, kneel, or watch your kingdom die. The world froze. Wolves circled Liren, waiting, terrified he might bow again. Liren growled, baring his fangs. Never. The leader smiled thinly. Then we will take what broke you. His gaze slid to Saris. Every wolf turned. Saris felt the air leave her lungs. Liren moved instantly, positioning himself between her and the Creed leader. You will not touch her. You cannot protect her, the leader whispered. Not from destiny. He raised his hand, and Creed archers aimed their black-poisoned arrows at Saris. Liren's blood ran cold. No! He lunged forward, but a dozen Creed warriors swarmed him at once, dragging him down. Saris screamed as arrows flew. Time slowed. She saw Maelor leap in front of her, taking 2 arrows to the chest. Saw Ilani unleash a wave of blinding light. Saw wolves rushing to shield her. But one arrow slipped through, straight toward her heart. A silver blur slammed into her, knocking her to the ground. Liren. The arrow hit him instead. Saris's scream tore through the battlefield. Liren! He collapsed beside her, blood pooling beneath him. His breath hitched, shallow. Poison streamed from the wound. His fingers curled weakly around hers. Saris! She cradled his head, sobbing. No, no, stay with me, please. His eyes fluttered. Do not be afraid. I'm afraid, she cried. Not of them, of losing you. He smiled faintly, pained. Then you understand. The leader stepped forward triumphantly. The king falls. And the creed roared in savage victory. But they were wrong. Because the moment Saris's tears touched Liren's skin, his eyes snapped open, glowing with a blinding, unnatural silver. His body trembled with a force that shook the stones beneath them. Wolves gasped, stumbling back. The creed leader froze. Impossible, he whispered. A symbol ignited on Liren's chest, an ancient mark shaped like a crescent spiraling into flame. The eclipse mark. The sign of a wolf who could not die until his mate lived or chose to let him go. The mark glowed brighter as Liren rose slowly to his feet, the arrow falling from his body. Saris stared, breathless. Liren, what is that? He turned to her, voice echoing with power. It is the truth I ran from. His gaze softened. You are my fated bond. Shock and warmth collided inside her. But there was no time to speak, because Liren's aura exploded outward like a shockwave. Creed warriors were thrown across the courtyard. The leader staggered back. No, no, this cannot be! Liren stepped forward, eyes blazing, power radiating through every stone. You wanted a king on his knees. He lifted his hand, energy swirling like silver fire. Instead, you've awoken a king who bows to no one. And as the mountain trembled, the battle for Moonspire, and for Saris, reached its breaking point. The courtyard of Moonspire shook beneath Liren Vael's feet as the eclipse mark blazed across his chest, its silver fire pulsing like a second heartbeat. Cresting waves of power surged from him, rippling through stone, air, and shadow. Creed warriors staggered back, scrambling as if gravity had betrayed them. Wolves stared in awe, some dropping to one knee, others frozen mid-strike. Saris Dawnfall watched with trembling breath, her heart beating in wild, terrified hope. This wasn't the Liren she knew. This wasn't the king who guarded emotion like a locked fortress. This was something older, something prophesied, something awakened by a bond neither of them had asked for. But both had been pulled into. Liren's gaze locked onto the creed leader. You wanted blood, he said, voice echoing with an eerie, almost divine resonance. You'll choke on it, the leader snarled, stepping backward. You are not meant to survive the bond. You were meant to fall. Liren stepped forward, each stride cracking the ground beneath him. I did fall, he growled. His eyes slid to Saris, softening in a way that nearly undid her. And she caught me. Silver fire erupted around him, transforming into a radiant vortex. The creed launched forward in panic, but nothing could touch him now. The first wave of creed warriors charged, weapons raised, but as they crossed into Liren's aura, their blades ignited with scorching light, burning their own hands. They screamed, stumbling back. Liren lifted his hand, and the air itself seemed to bend around his command. With a single motion, he sent a shockwave of force rippling outward. Warriors flew like leaves in a storm, slamming into walls, pillars, and frozen stone. Wolves gasped, stunned. Ilani's voice trembled with awe and fear. The prophecy, it was true. Mailer, bloodied but standing, stared wide-eyed at the glowing mark on Liren's chest. The Eclipse Wolf, he whispered. The king who rises only when bound to a mate. Saris's breath caught. Mate. The word stung and soothed at once. The creed leader regained his footing, raising a blade etched with runes. Power means nothing without control, he roared. He flung the blade toward Liren, but it melted mid-air, collapsing into molten metal before it ever reached him. Liren's voice rumbled like distant thunder. You should never have touched her. The leader tried to retreat, panic widening his eyes. "Kill him!" he shouted to his remaining soldiers. But none moved. The warriors, terrified, backed away instead, shaking their heads. "Face me," Liren commanded. His aura increased in intensity, a shimmering cyclone of silver fury. "You wanted a king on his knees. Come and take one." Desperation twisted the leader's face as he lunged for Saris instead. "If the bond is the source of his power," he snarled, "then ending her ends him." Saris froze. Liren didn't. Before the man's blade touched air, Liren appeared between them, moving faster than sight. He caught the blade in one bare hand. It hissed against his skin, but didn't cut, didn't break, didn't matter. Liren's eyes blazed, silver and merciless. "You threatened the wrong heart." He crushed the blade like brittle stone. The leader stumbled back, tripping over rubble. Wait! Liren grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground as easily as lifting a twig. "You chased my weakness," he said quietly, "but she made me unstoppable." Saris stepped forward slowly, voice trembling but steady. "Liren," he glanced back at her. The fury on his face softened, shifted, bent into something warm and devastating. "Saris," he whispered, "look away." She shook her head gently. "No." Something in him wavered, because she saw everything. His rage, his love, his fear, his power. And she didn't flinch. Liren released the leader, not to spare him, but to drop him at Saris's feet, where Maelor bound him with chains forged for traitors. The battle around them stilled. The creed fled. The last masked warrior disappeared beyond the gate. And just like that, the war was over. Silence fell in the courtyard, thick, disbelieving, crackling with new truth. Wolves looked between Liren and Saris with wide, uncertain eyes. Some knelt. Some bowed their heads. Others simply stared, stunned by the mark glowing on their king's chest and the girl who'd awakened it. Liren turned fully toward Saris, chest rising and falling, silver fire slowly dimming. She approached him on trembling legs, her voice a whisper. "You scared me." He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear. "I scared myself," he murmured. "When the arrow hit me, all I thought was that I wasn't ready to lose you. Not now. Not ever." Saris placed her hand over the glowing mark on his chest, feeling its warmth pulse beneath her palm. "You bowed for me," she whispered. "You rose for me." Liren leaned his forehead against hers. "I would burn the sky for you." She closed her eyes, breath shuddering. What? What does the mark mean for us?" Liren exhaled shakily. "It means we are bound. Not by choice, by fate, by something older than wolves." Saris's heart twisted. "Do you regret it?" His answer was immediate. "No." He lifted her chin, soft, reverent. "You gave me something the world denied me." Her voice cracked. "What?" "A reason to fight for more than a throne." By the time the sun rose, Moonspire stood quiet. Snow melted in warm streaks where Liren's aura had touched it. Wolves tended the wounded. The surviving creed were imprisoned. Ilani, pale and defeated, bowed her head to her king, not out of worship, but acceptance. The prophecy had chosen its path. Inside the great hall, Liren and Saris stood before the silver hearth flames. She touched his hand gently. What happens now? He turned to her with a softness that could break worlds. Now? He took her hand fully, intertwining their fingers. Now we choose what the prophecy couldn't. She blinked up at him. And what's that? He smiled, small, real, vulnerable. How to live with a bond neither of us expected, but both of us want. Saris's breath trembled. I'm not a wolf, Liren. You're everything I need, he said simply, and everything I didn't know I was allowed to have. She felt warmth spread through her chest, slow, certain, unstoppable. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. Lyran, I'm scared. He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his heartbeat. Then let me be brave for both of us. The eclipse mark glowed softly, not from rage, but peace. Outside, the wolves howled, not in mourning, but in allegiance, in acceptance, in celebration. The king who never bowed had chosen his fate, chosen his mate, chosen her. And Sarah's Dawnfall, once the outsider, once the vulnerable girl in the courtyard, stood beside the Wolf King as the dawn broke across Moonspire. A new era rising with the morning light. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, then I know one thing for sure. Your heart's still racing, just like mine. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below and tell me, should I turn this into a full series? Do you want a season 2 following Lyran and Ceres as they face new enemies, deeper bonds, and the consequences of a king loving a human? Tell me what country you're watching from, tell me your favorite part, and tell me which character you want more of. I'm reading every comment, so don't be shy. Thank you for watching, thank you for feeling this story with me, and until the next tale, stay wild, stay brave, and stay here with me.